Sarah Rodriguez walked through the heavy glass doors of Fort Henderson Training Center at exactly 6:15 in the morning. The building smelled like disinfectant and sweat. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she made her way toward the main training room. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. The thick black winter coat she wore was too big for her small frame. It hung around her like a tent, hiding everything underneath. She moved slowly and carefully, like someone carrying a bowl of hot soup that might spill at any moment. Her breathing was shallow and controlled. Other soldiers were already warming up in the main training room. They were doing jumping jacks and stretching exercises. The sound of their voices and movements filled the air with energy. Sarah paused outside the door and took a deep breath before entering. Commander Williams was standing in the center of the room with his arms crossed. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. He had been training new soldiers for 15 years. In that time, he had heard every excuse imaginable from people who did not want to work hard. The moment Sarah walked into the room, Commander Williams looked at his watch. It showed 6:25. Training was supposed to start at 6:15, sharp. His jaw tightened as he watched Sarah walk toward the group of other soldiers. The other new recruits were young and eager. There was Marcus, a 19-year-old from Texas who wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. There was Jenny, a college graduate who joined the military to pay for medical school. There was David, a quiet man from Ohio who said he needed direction in his life. All of them had arrived on time. All of them were ready to begin their first day of serious military training. They wore their standard military workout clothes and moved with the nervous energy of people starting something important. Sarah looked different from the others. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes like she had not slept in days. She kept her coat zipped up tight, even though the room was warm from all the other people exercising. Commander Williams watched her join the group. He noticed how she moved like every step hurt. He noticed how she kept her arms close to her body. He noticed the careful way she breathed. But instead of concern, these observations made him feel annoyed. In his 15 years of training soldiers, Commander Williams had developed strong opinions about certain types of people. He believed that military service was about pushing yourself beyond what felt comfortable. He believed that excuses were the enemy of excellence. He had seen too many talented people fail because they gave up when things got difficult. "Rodriguez," he called out in a sharp voice that cut through the noise in the room. "You are 10 minutes late for morning drills." The room suddenly became quieter. All the other soldiers turned to look at Sarah. Some of them had worried expressions on their faces. Others looked curious about what would happen next. Everyone knew that being late on the first day was not a good way to start military training. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Commander Williams. Her movement was slow and deliberate. She did not rush or panic the way most people do when they are called out by someone in authority. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'm sorry I was late. I had some trouble getting ready this morning. My body is not feeling well today." The words hung in the air like smoke. Commander Williams felt his annoyance grow stronger. He had heard these exact words so many times before. New soldiers always seemed to have mysterious health problems that appeared right when the hard work was supposed to begin. Marcus whispered something to Jenny. David looked down at his shoes. The other soldiers tried to continue their warm-up exercises, but everyone was really paying attention to what was happening between Sarah and their commander. Commander Williams walked closer to Sarah. His boots made sharp sounds on the concrete floor. He moved with the confident stride of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. "Not feeling well," he repeated, and there was no kindness in his voice. "Let me guess, Rodriguez. You stayed up too late last night watching movies. Or maybe you're just nervous about doing real military training for the first time." Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, sir. It is not like that. I really cannot do the full workout today. Maybe I could just do some light exercises instead." Her voice was steady, but it was also very quiet. She spoke like someone who was used to trying not to make noise. She did not argue or get defensive the way most people do when they are accused of lying. Commander Williams had expected her to get flustered or to come up with a more detailed excuse. When people were lying about being sick, they usually talked too much. They gave unnecessary details about symptoms or made up complicated stories about what was wrong. But Sarah just stood there waiting. Her silence made Commander Williams even more convinced that she was testing him. He believed she wanted to see if he would be strict or if he would let her get away with being lazy. The other soldiers were now completely focused on the conversation. Some of them started to smile slightly. They had all heard stories about drill sergeants and tough commanders who did not accept weak excuses. They expected to see Sarah get assigned extra push-ups or be made to run laps as punishment. Jenny felt bad for Sarah, but she also felt relieved that she was not the one getting in trouble. Marcus was glad that he had arrived early and made a good first impression. David wondered if Sarah was really sick or if she was just scared about the training. Commander. Williams looked at Sarah for a long moment. He studied her pale face and the way she held herself so carefully. But instead of seeing someone who might be in real trouble, he saw what he expected to see. He saw another new soldier who thought military training would be easy and was looking for a way out when reality hit. The morning sun was starting to shine through the high windows of the training room. It cast long shadows across the floor and made everything look sharp and clear. In that bright light, the scene looked simple. A commander dealing with a soldier who was making excuses. A tale as old as military training itself. But sometimes, the brightest light can create the deepest shadows. And sometimes what looks simple on the surface is hiding something much more complicated underneath. Commander Williams crossed his arms and stared at Sarah Rodriguez. The muscles in his jaw twitched with growing irritation. In all his years of training soldiers, he had developed a deep dislike for people who made excuses on their very first day. To him, it showed a lack of character and commitment. The training room had become uncomfortably quiet. The other soldiers had stopped their warm-up exercises completely now. Marcus pretended to stretch his leg muscles, but his eyes were fixed on the drama unfolding in front of him. Jenny bit her lower lip nervously. David shifted his weight from one foot to the other, unsure whether to look away or keep watching. Rodriguez Commander Williams said, his voice getting louder. I have been training soldiers since before you were old enough to tie your own shoes. I have been doing this job for 15 long years, and in that time I have heard every single excuse that exists in the human imagination. Sarah remained perfectly still. She did not fidget or look away from his intense stare. Her hands hung at her sides, but Commander Williams noticed they were shaking slightly. He assumed it was because she was nervous about getting caught in her lie. Sick grandmother, he continued, beginning to pace in a small circle around her. Broken alarm clock that somehow only breaks on training days. Twisted ankle from the incredibly dangerous activity of walking to the car. Food poisoning from restaurants that mysteriously only make military recruits sick. Some of the other soldiers started to grin. They had heard these classic excuses before, either from friends or from their own attempts to get out of difficult situations. The way Commander Williams listed them made the excuses sound ridiculous and childish. Sarah's silence was starting to unnerve everyone in the room. Most people would have started talking by now. They would have either apologized quickly and promised to do better, or they would have tried to defend themselves with more detailed explanations. But Sarah just stood there, absorbing his words like a sponge absorbing water. Her quiet response made Commander Williams even more angry. He interpreted her silence as disrespect. In his mind, she was showing that she did not care about his authority or his experience. He thought she was demonstrating the kind of attitude that would make her a poor soldier and a danger to her fellow service members. You know what I think, Rodriguez, Commander Williams said, stopping directly in front of her. I think you are testing me right now. I think you want to see if the old commander is going to be soft on the new recruits. I think you are trying to figure out how much you can get away with. The morning sun had risen higher, and bright light was streaming through the tall windows. It illuminated the tension in the room and made everyone look sharp and clear. The other soldiers could see the sweat forming on Sarah's forehead, but they thought it was from nervousness about being confronted. Well, let me tell you something, Rodriguez, Commander Williams continued. His voice was now loud enough that people in the hallway outside could probably hear him. In the real world, the enemy does not care if you do not feel well. When bullets are flying and people are depending on you, nobody wants to hear that you are having a bad morning. Marcus nodded slightly. This made sense to him. He had joined the military because he wanted to be strong and reliable. He believed that Commander Williams was teaching an important lesson about mental toughness and personal responsibility. Your fellow soldiers do not care if you had trouble sleeping, Commander Williams went on. They do not care if you're feeling sorry for yourself. What they care about is whether you can be trusted to do your job when their lives are on the line. Jenny started to feel uncomfortable. The commander's words made logical sense, but something about Sarah's appearance bothered her. There was something in the other woman's eyes that looked like real pain, not just nervousness or laziness. Commander Williams was building up to his final point. He had given this type of speech many times before to soldiers who he believed were trying to take shortcuts. In his experience, the best way to handle excuse makers was to make them face the consequences of their choices immediately and publicly. "So here's what we are going to do," he announced, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "You are going to do double the workout today. Double the push-ups, double the running, double everything we had planned for the group." Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, Commander Williams could see something that looked almost like resignation. But he misinterpreted this expression too. To him, it looked like the face of someone who had been caught and was now accepting their punishment. "And if you cannot handle the extra work," Commander Williams continued, "maybe you should think seriously about finding a different career. The military is not for people who look for easy ways out when things get challenging." The other soldiers were completely absorbed in the confrontation now. Some of them felt excited to see military discipline in action. Others were starting to feel sorry for Sarah, even though they still believed she was probably making excuses. David found himself thinking about his own reasons for joining the military. He had been drifting through life without much direction or purpose. Part of him was attracted to the idea of being pushed harder than he had ever been pushed before. But seeing Sarah look so defeated made him wonder if he would be able to handle the pressure when his turn came. Sarah looked directly at Commander Williams. Her voice was still quiet, but there was something different about it now. Something that sounded like determination mixed with desperation. "Sir," she said, with respect, "I do not think you understand what I am dealing with right now." Commander Williams felt his anger reach a new level. To him, this sounded like the beginning of another excuse. It sounded like she was about to tell him some sob story that was supposed to make him feel sorry for her. He had heard too many sob stories over the years from people who simply did not want to work hard. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Rodriguez," he said with a laugh that had no warmth or humor in it. "You are dealing with the fact that military training is hard work. You are dealing with the reality that this job requires physical and mental toughness. And you are looking for someone to give you permission to quit before you even try." The laugh echoed off the walls of the training room. It was a harsh sound that made everyone feel uncomfortable. Even the soldiers who agreed with Commander Williams started to shift nervously. Marcus suddenly remembered his first day of high school football practice. The coach had been tough and demanding, but there had been an underlying sense that he cared about making the players better. This felt different somehow. This felt meaner. Jenny watched Sarah's face carefully. She was studying the way the other woman held her body and the expression in her eyes. Something was not right here. Something was not adding up. But she could not figure out what it was. The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Everyone could sense that this confrontation was building toward some kind of climax. Commander Williams was clearly expecting Sarah to either break down and confess to being lazy or to storm out of the room in anger. But Sarah did something that no one expected. She reached up slowly and put her hand on the zipper of her heavy winter coat. The sound of the zipper being pulled down seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet training room. Sarah Rodriguez moved her hand slowly along the metal teeth of her coat zipper. Every eye in the room was focused on her movements. The other soldiers had no idea what they were about to see, but they could sense that something important was happening. Commander Williams was getting ready to tell her to stop wasting time and start her punishment exercises. He opened his mouth to speak, but something about the look on Sarah's face made him pause. There was a determination in her eyes that he had not seen before. It was not the look of someone who was about to give up or make more excuses. "You want to know what I am dealing with," Sir Sarah said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "You want to know why I cannot do a full workout today?" The zipper reached the bottom of her coat. Sarah took a deep breath and began to pull her right arm out of the sleeve. The thick black material slid down her arm slowly, like a curtain being drawn back to reveal something hidden underneath. "Rodriguez, I do not need to see Commander Williams," started to say. He was uncomfortable now. Something about the way she was moving made him realize that this was not going according to his expectations. This was not how these confrontations usually went, but Sarah was not listening to him anymore. She was focused on what she needed to do. She pulled her left arm out of the other sleeve and let the heavy coat fall to the floor behind her. What everyone saw next changed everything. Sarah's arms were a canvas of violence painted in purple, blue, and black. The bruises covered her skin, from her wrists all the way up to her shoulders. Some of the marks were fresh and dark, looking like they had happened just hours ago. Others were older, fading to yellow and green around the edges, showing that this had been going on for a long time. The room became so quiet that people could hear their own heartbeats. Marcus felt his stomach turn over. He had seen bruises before, from sports injuries and accidents, but these were different. These bruises had a pattern to them. They looked like they had been made on purpose. Jenny put her hand over her mouth to stop herself from making a sound. She was studying to be a nurse before she joined the military, and she knew what different types of injuries looked like. These were not bruises from falling down or bumping into furniture. These were bruises from being hurt by another person. David took a step backward without realizing it. His father had been in the military, and his father had always taught him that real men protected women and children. Seeing Sarah's arms made him feel angry and sick at the same time, but the bruises were not the worst part of what they could see. There were also cuts on Sarah's arms. Some of them were covered with small bandages that looked fresh and clean. Others were healing but still visible as red lines across her skin. Her left arm had marks that looked exactly like fingerprints, as if someone had grabbed her so hard that their fingers had left permanent impressions. Commander Williams felt like someone had punched him in the chest. His face went from red with anger to pale white in just a few seconds. In 15 years of military service, he had seen soldiers injured in training accidents and combat situations. But this was different. This was worse somehow because it had not happened on a battlefield or during a dangerous mission. Sarah turned slightly so that everyone could see her back through her thin military t-shirt. More dark bruises were visible through the light-colored fabric. There was a large bandage on her left shoulder blade that suggested an injury too serious to leave uncovered. "My husband came home drunk last night," Sarah said in a voice so quiet that everyone had to strain their ears to hear her words. "He was angry because he lost money playing poker with his friends. He decided that it was my fault, because I did not try to stop him from going out to gamble." The words hit the room like a physical force. Marcus felt his hands curl into fists without him thinking about it. Jenny had tears starting to form in her eyes. David found himself thinking about his own mother and how his father had always treated her with love and respect. Commander Williams wanted to say something, but no words would come out of his mouth. He had been trained to handle many difficult situations during his military career. He had dealt with homesick soldiers, scared recruits, and people who were struggling with the demands of military life, but he had never dealt with anything like this. "He threw me against the wall first," Sarah continued, pointing to a large dark bruise on her right shoulder. The bruise was roughly the size and shape of a doorframe corner. Then he grabbed my arms and shook me while he screamed about how everything wrong in his life was because of me. The other soldiers were struggling to process what they were hearing. This was their first day of military training, and they had expected to learn about physical fitness and following orders. They had not expected to confront something this serious and heartbreaking. Sarah's voice remained steady as she continued to explain what had happened to her. She spoke like someone who had told this story before, or like someone who had practiced the words in her mind many times. "The cuts on my arms happened when he pushed me, and I fell into our glass coffee table," she said, holding up her right arm so they could see the bandaged wounds more clearly. I spent 3 hours last night cleaning my own blood off the kitchen floor and using tweezers to pick pieces of glass out of my skin. Commander Williams realized that everything he thought he knew about this situation had been completely wrong. This was not a lazy soldier looking for an easy way out of hard work. This was not someone testing his authority or trying to get special treatment. This was a woman who had survived something terrible and still found the courage to show up and try to build a better life for herself. Peterson, one of the older soldiers in the group, made a small choking sound like he was about to be sick. He had a younger sister at home, and the thought of someone hurting her this way made him feel violent and protective at the same time. Sarah looked directly at Commander Williams. Her eyes were not asking for pity or special treatment. They were asking for understanding and maybe just a little bit of respect for what she had endured. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows seemed different now. It illuminated not just a training room full of new military recruits, but a moment when everyone present realized that some battles are fought in places where no one can see them, and some warriors carry wounds that no uniform can hide. The silence in the training room was so complete that everyone could hear the sound of their own breathing. Sarah Rodriguez stood in the center of the room wearing only her thin military t-shirt and workout pants. Her injuries were now fully visible to everyone present. The dark bruises on her arms looked even worse under the bright fluorescent lights. Commander Williams stared at Sarah with his mouth slightly open. His brain was struggling to process what he was seeing and hearing. For 15 years, he had prided himself on being able to read people accurately. He thought he could spot a liar or someone making excuses from across the room. Now he realized how wrong he had been. Sarah continued speaking in that same quiet, steady voice. Her words cut through the silence like a knife through paper. "I did not sleep at all last night," she said. "Every time I tried to move in bed, something hurt. My ribs ache when I breathe too deeply. My back feels like it is on fire when I try to stand up straight. This morning, I could barely lift my arms high enough to brush my teeth." Jenny wiped tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. She was thinking about her own family back home. Her parents had been married for 25 years, and her father had never once raised his voice to her mother, let alone his hand. The idea that someone could hurt another person this way, especially someone they were supposed to love, made her feel sick to her stomach. Marcus was clenching and unclenching his fists. His face had turned red with anger, but it was a different kind of anger than what Commander Williams had shown earlier. This was the anger of someone who wanted to protect an innocent person from harm. He found himself wishing he could meet Sarah's husband face to face. "But I came here anyway," Sarah continued. "Because this job, this training, this military career, this is my way out. This is my chance to build a life where no one can hurt me anymore." David felt ashamed of his earlier thoughts. He had been annoyed with Sarah for being late and making excuses. He had been looking forward to seeing her get punished for what he thought was laziness. Now he understood that she had shown more courage just by walking through the front door than he had ever shown in his entire life. Sarah looked directly at Commander Williams. Her eyes were clear and steady even though her body was obviously in pain. "I was not making excuses, sir," she said. "I was trying to be honest about what my body could handle today while still showing up and doing my best. I know that being a soldier means pushing through difficulty and pain, but I also know the difference between the kind of pain that makes you stronger and the kind of pain that comes from being hurt by someone who is supposed to protect you." Commander Williams felt like he was drowning in shame. Everything he had said to her now seemed cruel and ignorant. He had accused her of being weak and looking for easy ways out. In reality, she had demonstrated more strength and determination than most people would show in their entire lives. Peterson, who had been quiet throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke up. His voice was rough with emotion. "How long has this been going on?" he asked Sarah. Sarah turned to look at him. She seemed surprised that someone else was joining the conversation. For the past few minutes, it had felt like she and Commander Williams were the only two people in the room. 2 years, she answered simply. It started small. He would grab my arm too hard when he was angry, or push me when I said something that upset him. But it got worse over time, much worse. The room felt like it was getting smaller. The walls seemed to be closing in as everyone tried to absorb what they were hearing. These were young people who had joined the military to serve their country and protect innocent people. Learning that innocent people were being hurt in their own homes by people they trusted made everything feel upside down. Jenny found her voice and asked the question that everyone was thinking. Why did you not leave him? Why did you not just get away from him? Sarah's laugh was bitter and sad. It was the laugh of someone who had heard this question many times before. Because leaving is not simple, she said. When someone controls all your money, threatens your family members, and has spent 2 years convincing you that everything bad that happens is your fault, leaving feels impossible. When someone tells you every day that you are worthless and stupid, and that no one else would ever want you, you start to believe it. Commander Williams wanted to say something helpful, but he could not think of any words that would be appropriate. He had been trained to solve problems with clear orders and direct action. This situation was too complicated for simple solutions. He has my car keys, my credit cards, and my identification papers. Sarah continued. He knows where my mother lives and where my sister works. He has told me exactly what he will do to them if I ever try to leave him. He has also told me what he will do to me if I ever tell anyone about what happens at home. Marcus felt his anger growing stronger. He was a simple person who believed in right and wrong. To him, this situation was clearly wrong and someone needed to make it right. But he was also smart enough to understand that the solution was not as easy as he wanted it to be. But you told us, David said quietly. You just told all of us about what he does to you. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, she said. Because for the first time in 2 years, I am somewhere where he cannot reach me. For the first time in 2 years, I am surrounded by people who are trained to protect others. For the first time in 2 years, I have hope that maybe I can build a life where I do not have to be afraid every single day. She paused and looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. I know that military training is hard, she said. I know that it will push me beyond what feels comfortable. But I also know that the hardest thing I will ever do in the military will still be easier than going home to my husband tonight. The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Everyone present realized that they were witnessing something much more important than a simple training exercise. They were witnessing someone fighting for their life and their future. Commander Williams looked around the training room at the faces of his soldiers. Every single person was staring at Sarah Rodriguez with a mixture of respect, horror, and admiration. These were tough young people who had volunteered for military service. But seeing what Sarah had survived made them realize that some of the hardest battles in life happen far away from any battlefield. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, and bright light was streaming through the tall windows. But the mood in the room was heavy and serious. Everyone felt like they had just learned something important about courage and strength that they had never understood before. Commander Williams cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was completely different from the harsh, demanding tone he had used earlier. Now he sounded gentle but firm, like a father talking to a daughter who had been hurt. Peterson, he said quietly, take Rodriguez to the medical unit. Get those wounds properly cleaned and bandaged by people who know what they are doing. Peterson immediately stepped forward. He was a big man with kind eyes who had always been protective of people smaller than himself. He offered Sarah his arm for support, being careful not to touch any of the injured areas. Sir Sarah said, looking back at Commander Williams, I can still do some light training today. I do not want special treatment. I do not want the other soldiers to think I am getting things easier than they are. Commander Williams shook his head slowly. He was thinking about his own daughter, who was about the same age as Sarah. The thought of someone hurting his daughter this way made him feel protective and angry at the same time. Rodriguez, he said, and his voice was full of respect now. You have already shown more strength and courage today than most people show in their entire lives. Getting medical care is not special treatment. It is what any smart soldier would do to take care of themselves so they can fight another day. Sarah nodded. But Commander Williams could see that she was still worried about what the other soldiers would think of her. She had spent 2 years being told that she was weak and worthless. It would take time for her to believe that she deserved care and respect. As Peterson helped Sarah walk toward the door, Commander Williams called out to her. Rodriguez, she turned back to look at him. For the first time that morning, there was something that looked almost like hope in her eyes. When you are ready to come back to full training, you let me know, Commander Williams said, and if you need help with anything else, anything at all, you come talk to me. That is not an order. That is a promise from one human being to another. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were different tears than the ones Jenny had been crying. These were tears of relief and gratitude. For the first time in 2 years, someone in authority had offered to help her instead of hurt her. Thank you, sir, she whispered. After Sarah and Peterson left the room, Commander Williams turned to address the remaining soldiers. Marcus, Jenny, and David were still standing in shocked silence. They looked like people who had just witnessed something that would change how they saw the world forever. Let me tell you something, Commander Williams said to them. His voice was serious but not harsh. I just learned a very important lesson about judging people before I know their whole story. Rodriguez showed up here today when most people would have stayed home in bed. She told the truth when it would have been easier to lie or make up a simple excuse. And she is fighting for her future when someone is trying to destroy it. He paused and looked each of the remaining soldiers in the eye. That woman is exactly the kind of person we want in our military, he continued. She is strong, honest, and determined to keep going no matter what tries to stop her. She understands what real courage looks like because she has had to use it every day just to survive. Marcus raised his hand slightly. Commander Williams nodded for him to speak. Sir, Marcus said. What can we do to help her? Commander Williams smiled for the first time that morning. The question showed him that these young soldiers had good hearts and wanted to do the right thing. The best thing you can do is treat her like the strong soldier she is, he answered. Do not treat her like she is broken or fragile. Do not ask her a lot of personal questions about her situation. Just be her teammates and help her succeed in her training. Jenny raised her hand next. Sir, she said, how did you know what to do? How did you know what to say to her? Commander Williams thought about the question for a moment before answering. I did not know what to do, Jenny, he said honestly. I made terrible mistakes today. I judged her without understanding her situation. I said things that were cruel and ignorant. The only thing I did right was listen when she found the courage to tell us the truth. He walked over to the window and looked out at the base where soldiers were training and preparing to serve their country. Being a good leader means being willing to admit when you are wrong, he continued. It means listening more than you talk. It means understanding that everyone has battles you cannot see and struggles you do not know about. David had been quiet throughout most of the morning, but now he found his voice. Sir, he said. Will she be safe here? Will he try to hurt her here too? Commander Williams turned back to face his soldiers. His expression was determined and protective. This base has security and people trained to handle dangerous situations, he said. But more than that, she now has a whole community of soldiers who will look out for her. She is not alone anymore, and that makes all the difference. Over the following weeks, Sarah Rodriguez became one of the most respected soldiers in the entire training unit. Not because her training was easy, but because everyone knew that if she could survive what she had survived and still show up ready to work, she could handle anything the military could throw at her. The story of what happened that morning spread throughout the base. Other soldiers who were struggling with their own hidden problems found the courage to ask for help. Commander Williams changed how he approached training, always remembering to listen before making judgments. Sarah learned that telling the truth to the right people at the right time can change everything. She discovered that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, and that there were good people in the world who would help her build the life she deserved. And Commander Williams learned that being a good leader meant seeing the whole person, not just the surface. He learned that real strength sometimes looks like weakness, and that the bravest soldiers are often the ones who are fighting battles that no one else can see.